Okay, we're going to review chapter 9 today. We're going to start with lessons 9.1 and 9.2. In those lessons, we talked about showing fractions and decimals and recording them through the hundredths place. We're going to get started by shading 1 6/10 of the model. When I look at my model, I notice that I have two holes, 1, 2. Each hole is divided into 10 equal places or parts because 10 is my denominator. So if I shade that, since this is a mixed number, I have a hole, I want to shade the whole first hole. Then for the fraction 6/10, I'm going to come to my second hole and I'm going to shade 6 out of those 10 parts. So now my model is shaded to show 1 6/10. To show that as a decimal point, we're going to be using our place value chart down below. And in our place value chart, we can see that ones is our holes. So how many holes do you have? You represent that in the ones place because a ones place is a whole number. Then to the right of your ones place, you have your decimal point, and then we start working with parts that are smaller than a whole in our tenths and our hundredths place value locations. So if I want to record 1 6/10 as a decimal, since our model at the top has one hole shaded in our ones place, we're going to write the digit 1. Then we're going to move into the tenths place. And since our model was divided into 10 equal parts, we already know we're working with tenths, and we shaded 6 of them. So we write the digit 6. 1 6/10. All right, let's look at another model. So our next model is divided into 10 equal parts. So that tells me that I'm working with the place value section of tenths. When I look closely at the model, I can count how many I shaded out of those 10, and I shaded 7 out of the 10 places. So when I write that as a fraction, I'm going to write 7/10. The 7 represents the number of blue shaded areas, and the 10, your denominator, represents how many total parts are in the whole. If I want to write 7/10 as a decimal, I can use my little place value helper here. And since the whole is not shaded, in my ones place, I'm going to write a 0 because I don't have any holes. I have only part of a whole. So I show that by holding a 0 in the ones place. Then I have my decimal point, and I can record a 7 in the tenths place because 7 of those 10 equal parts are shaded. Let's look at another model, but this time our model is divided into 100 equal parts. So that tells me we're working in the hundredths spot. If I want to show this as a fraction, I can go ahead and just count all of the blue parts that are shaded. You can count them by ones if you wanted to, but I already know that there are 10 parts just in this column, so I can count each column by 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 2 more is 52. So there's 52 out of 100 parts shaded, so my fraction would be 52 hundredths. To write that as a decimal, I can use my handy dandy place value helper. The whole is not shaded, so I put a 0 in the ones place. I add my decimal point to the right of the ones place. And to record 52, I'm going to put a 5 in the tens place and a 2 in the hundredths place. And then that shows the number 52. So 0 and 52 hundredths. Great. So now it's your turn. You're going to practice on your own. You're going to show 9/10 and show me that as a decimal, 9/10. But then on the other side, you're going to show that as hundredths as well. What would 9/10 look like in hundredths form in a decimal? Then you'll move on to doing the same thing for 3/10, show it as a decimal, and then show it as a decimal as hundredths. And then when you come to 0 and 2/10, the decimal, you're going to convert that back to a fraction and then convert it to a fraction as hundredths. So go ahead and do that now. All right, great. Let's take a look at what you did. 9/10 as hundredths, all you need to do is add the 0 to the hundredths place, and you would have 90 hundredths. Good. 3/10 as hundredths, add that 0 to the hundredths place, and you have 0 and 30 hundredths. For the decimal, 2/10 as a fraction, it would look like this. And then as a fraction in hundredths, you add that 0 to the 2 and to the 10, and you end up with the fraction 20 hundredths. Good job. All right, let's move along. In lesson 9.4, we talked about showing decimals as total money amounts. And to do that, we had to count money amounts. So we're going to do that first. I like to group my money amounts. It makes it easier for me to add them mentally. So if I group them, I can see that I have 3 whole dollars, and I know that $1 is equal to 100 cents. So I need to have 100 cents and equal to equal 1 whole dollar. So I have 3 wholes, and then when I come over to count my coins, I would have 40, because these are dimes, so 10, 20, 30, 40, and 3 more would be 43. Well, 43 is less than 100, so I don't have a whole with those coins. So I have part of a whole. So to show that, I would write that I have $3.43. Notice I put a dollar sign at the beginning. That dollar sign is important to let us know that you are working with money amounts, a total money amount. But what's really cool, you could show a total money amount, and to show that total money amount as a decimal, all you have to do is take the dollar sign away. And now you're not showing it as total money amounts. Now you're just showing it as a decimal, 3 and 43 hundredths. To show it as a fraction, we would actually have a mixed number. Because remember, a mixed number is a whole number and a fraction. And a fraction is part of a whole. So I have 3 whole dollars and 43 cents out of a total of 100 possible cents. So I have 3 and 43 hundredths. So it's your turn. You're going to count this total money amount. And I want you to write the total money amount 3 ways. I want you to write it as a dollar total money amount. I want you to write it as a decimal form, and then write it as a mixed number. Okay, great. Let's see what you did. So if we counted these coin values, I can see that I have 2 whole dollars, 3 quarters, which is 75 cents, plus another dime, which is 85 cents, and 2 pennies takes me to 87 cents. So to show it as a total money amount, you should have wrote $2.87. And to show it as a decimal, remember, all you have to do is take away your dollar sign, and you have 2 and 87 hundredths. And as a mixed number, we have 2 and 87 hundredths. Good job. Let's move along to lesson 9.6, where we talked about adding fractions. And what we noticed when we added fractions is we remembered from before that when you add a fraction, your denominator needs to be the same. So here we were adding fractions that were 10 and hundredths. And we learned a little trick that to change 6/10 into hundredths, we know that 10 times 10 is 100. So we could multiply this 10 by 10, and it's going to equal 100. And then our denominators would be the same. When we do that, though, we have to make sure that whatever we did to the bottom, we did to the top. So we would have to multiply 6 by 10 also. And if we did that, we would end up with a fraction 60 hundredths. And 60 hundredths plus 4 hundredths equals 64 hundredths. Okay, so it's your turn. You're going to practice adding 5/10 plus 30/100 and 36/100 plus 5/10. Okay, let's check out what you did. If you changed your 5/10 to have a denominator of 100, you wanted to multiply your denominator and your numerator by 10, and you would be left with the new fraction 50/100. 50/100 plus 30/100 equals 80/100. Down on the bottom, 36/100 plus 5/10. Same thing, we need to change this 5/10 into hundredths form by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 10. And that would give us the fraction 50/100. So 36/100 plus 50/100 equals 86/100. We also talked about adding decimals. Same thing applies when you're adding decimals, is that you want to make sure that both your decimals are the same place value. So in 24/100 plus 1/10, we need to change this tenths place to show the decimal as hundredths. And all I have to do to show that decimal as hundredths is add a 0. And then it's very easy to add 24/100 plus 10/100. That gives us 34/100. So our answer would be 0 and 34/100. Now you could show that as a dollar amount as well by just adding the dollar sign to the beginning, and then you're showing it as a total money amount. So it's going to be your turn. You're going to add $0.08 plus $0.88, and then you're going to add 3/10 to 1 45/100. All right, let's take a look at what you did. When we add $0.08 to $0.88, we notice that both of them are in the hundredths place, so we can easily add them, and you should have ended up with 86 cents, $0.86. When we come down to the problem below, we can see that we have 3/10 plus 1 45/100. So we need to add that 0 to 3/10 to help us turn it into 30, and we're going to end up with 1 75/100. Show it as a total money amount would be $1.75. Okay, moving on to our last lesson that we did in Chapter 9, Lesson 9.7. You saw this problem in your lesson earlier this week, so we're just going to review it so that you can quickly compare some decimals, and then we'll be done for the day. So Tim has 5/10 of a dollar, and Sierra has 5/100 of a dollar. Who has more money? So remember, we used our models down here. We noticed that Tim's model was divided equally into tenths. Sierra's model was divided equally into hundredths. And then we kind of cubed our problem. Tim has 5/10 of a dollar, and which shows that we're working in the tenths place. And we shade at 5 of Tim's total 10 in his whole. And Sienna has 5/100 of a dollar, and we showed that by shading 5 out of her 100 parts in her whole. And when we recorded it, we had 0 ones, 0 tenths, and 5/100. So we remember that when we compare decimals, we want to make sure that we are working with both of the decimals in the hundredths place. So in order to do that, since Tim has 5/10, all we have to do is add that 0 in the hundredths place so that we can easily see that Tim has really 5/10 is equal to 50/100. So he has 50/100 and Sierra has 5/100. So we know that 5/10 is greater than the 0/10. So 5/10 is greater than 5/100, and Tim had more money. So it's your turn here. You're going to go on and compare 8 1/10 to 8 1/100. and then 1 7/10 to 1 7/100. And remember, you want to add your zeros in. So we added that 0 to her 1/10. So now we have 10 hundredths, and we can see that 10 is greater than 1. So 8 1/10 is greater than 8 100. Come down to the bottom. We wanted to add our 0 to show it as hundredths. And they look the same, so they are equal to each other. Great job in your review today. So we are all done. What you're going to need to do now is go back to your slide 1 and click your exit ticket. Your exit ticket is your chapter review today. Make sure you take your time solving your problems on paper first and then select your answer. Good job.